Hey guys, more fishing tips, and today we're talking about braided fishing line. When should you use it, and when does it outperform the other line types? So pretty much there's going to be 4 scenarios where braided line will outperform the other types of line. The first one is going to be anytime you're fishing on really heavy or thick vegetation, whether it's lily pads or matted grass or milfoil. Whenever you're putting your baits in and needing to drag bass out of thick, heavy vegetation, the braided line works far, far better than the others because it's very, very thin, so you can use a high strength line. Whenever you're pulling bass out of that thick stuff, you need a really high pound test line, 40, 50, 60 pound test, because you're applying a lot of force to try to drag them out. And fluorocarbon or monofilament line, they're just way too thick and stiff and wiry. Once you get over like 25, 30 pound test, they just make it impossible to use those really high pound 40, 50, 60 pound lines. So you need the thin, strong diameter of a braided line to be able to drag bass out of the thick stuff. Additionally, the braided line is kind of rough and coarse to the touch, so it almost acts as a bit of a saw blade when you're dragging it through vegetation. It helps cut through that stuff, which also helps you be more efficient bringing your baits and bass back to you through that thick vegetation and grass. The second scenario is going to be when you're topwater fishing. The reason is braided line floats, and whenever you're fishing a topwater lure, you want a floating line. A fluorocarbon, for example, will sink in the water. It makes it really hard to work your baits properly and fish them, and it messes up the action. You need a floating line, and the braid floats. Now, monofilament line also does float, so with like treble hooked lures, like a popper or a walking bait or maybe a chopper style lure, you can use monofilament if you want. It also works just fine with those treble hook lures when you don't need a lot of power in your hook set. But with like single or dual hook lures like a hollow body frog or a toad or something like that, when you need more power in the hook set, the braid is the better option. A good medium is kind of like a braided main line to a monofilament leader maybe. A lot of guys run that and then just will cut off the leader whenever they need to fish like a frog or something. But you do want a floating line whenever you're fishing a topwater lures. Most people just use a straight braid like all the time. And then the third scenario is going to be whenever you're finesse fishing. I pretty much use a braided line to a fluorocarbon leader 100% of the time with my finesse setups. The reason is the braided line is very, very thin, so you can still cast those lightweight baits very well, very accurately. And then because it has no stretch and it's very lightweight, you have a lot of sensitivity and you're very directly connected to those lightweight baits. It just makes it much easier to fish and connect and feel those lightweight baits, work them properly, even like detect small bites from finicky bass. The lightweight, no stretch braided line just makes it much easier to work your finesse lightweight baits properly, and you can still cast them as far as you need with the very thin diameter of a braided line. So I pretty much use a braided main line, maybe like a 12 or 15 pound test to about an 8 pound test fluorocarbon leader on 100% of my finesse setups. And then the fourth and last scenario where braided line is really good is pretty much anytime you're doing saltwater fishing. It's kind of funny, your saltwater setups are pretty much going to look identical to your finesse setups. Spinning rod and reel, braided main line, and then a fluoro or mono leader. It's just obviously much heavier versions of that finesse setup. And the reason is, when you're saltwater fishing, you want to be able to cast a mile. The braid helps with that. You need to be able to fight big fish, so the high pound test for the braid helps with that. And then you want to be able to have as much line as possible on your spool, because when you're fighting big saltwater fish, they can pull and rip a lot of drag. So you want maximum line capacity as well. And the thin diameter of the braid allows you to put on a ton of line on those 4,000 to 6,000 size reels. So in certain scenarios, braided line is incredibly advantageous and will help you catch a lot more fish. And it's kind of a must-have piece of fishing equipment, whether you're a freshwater or saltwater fisherman. You got to know how to use braid. Alright guys, that was a quick braided line breakdown. Stay tuned though, I'll be dropping more videos like this pretty much every day. Feel free to subscribe if you want, and thanks for watching.